Well, hello everybody, I'm Garrett. You're watching 11 Bang Bang. Recently, charges were filed against Alec Baldwin in the Rush shooting. This is a subject I didn't really care to revisit, but since that happened, my old video on Can a Single Action Army Go Off by Itself has taken off again, and I've gotten a lot of questions, and now's the time to answer them, I guess. So if you guys enjoy watching this kind of thing, well, I'll keep making them. Now, the reason that I'm interested in this subject is not because the fact that Alec Baldwin shot somebody or that it was done on a Western movie set. That all happened, and really, to be quite honest, although I felt sorry for Halyna Hutchins and her family, I really didn't change my life or affect me in any way until Alec Baldwin got on national television and tried to blame the whole situation on the Colt Single Action Army and its clones. And instantly the internet was filled with a bunch of people who had no idea what they were talking about, telling everyone else that the Single Action Army is one of the most unsafe firearms in the history of firearms. Now, I've made 3 videos on this subject alone. As a matter of fact, Snapper's Antique Firearms and myself and several other people have gone to some pretty extreme lengths to prove that the Single Action Army is, in all reality, one of the safest firearms out there. And I'll link to my video here on why they load 5. That is a common question. Why do people load just 5 if it's so safe? And in that video you'll see that maybe the loading 5 thing, it's not a reasonable excuse for this particular situation. Also in that video we did a very, very thorough spectral analysis on just how much pressure it would take to snap off the half-cock notch or the safety notch. And it turned out that even if you had dropped the gun on full cock, it would take at least 15 feet of fall for that gun to break through those notches and set that cartridge off. So no, it wasn't because he loaded all 6. It wasn't because he dropped the gun. Another question that's come up really often here lately: did he pull the trigger without knowing it, thumb the hammer back, and let it go? Well, this is my Single Action Army clone. This is a Uberti clone. Just like, it's really very, very close to what he was using. His was a Pieta. This is a Uberti. Alright, now, some of you guys hate this, but I'm going to check it. It is completely empty. Alright. The question is, as I've showed this before, cock the hammer, not going to go off. Cock the hammer and don't get it all the way back, it's going to catch in the half-cock notch. If you do not get it all the way to the half-cock notch, it's going to catch, if you can see right there, the hammer's not down, it's going to catch in the safety notch. And if you don't get to the safety notch, there's literally not going to be enough pressure to set that cartridge off. The way he described it was he came all the way back, let go, and the gun just discharged. And people have always talked about, well, you can wear the sear down, this and that. That is true. But the FBI tested the actual gun that he used, and it turned out that in order to get that gun to fire without pulling the trigger, they physically had to beat it till it broke, that very gun. And it was not broke when Mr. Baldwin was using it. So, yeah, I'm still not convinced at all that that's what happened. I know these guns. I've put many, many hours into using them, many, many hours into studying them and their history, and it's just not a common occurrence. The question that a lot of people ask is, and I've explained this before, it's called fanning: what happens if he placed his finger on the trigger, pulled, and then let the hammer go? Well, 100% the gun would fire then. The whole thing's more than likely a pure accident anyway. But I have a question for you. If he just pulled the hammer back with the finger on the trigger, let it go, and the gun fired, I want to point something out here. Before that can happen, what do I have to do? I have to pull the trigger. Whether you pull the trigger before you cock the hammer, or whether you cock the hammer and pull the trigger, the act of pulling the trigger has happened at some point. And the way that he described it in his video was he points the gun with his finger out, which, by the way, anybody who's ever handled a Single Action Army, you need your finger in that trigger guard whenever you start to cock the hammer. That's why you should consider cocking the hammer and pulling the trigger the same safety action. If you're not going to pull the trigger at someone, you shouldn't cock the hammer, because on a Single Action Army, it's a little bit of a bear to get that hammer cocked without having your finger inside the trigger guard. So just to prove my point about the whole cocking the hammer without your finger in the trigger guard like he claims to have done, this is the Colt Patterson. This is actually a replica by Pieta. By the way, beautiful Duke Fraser holster here. This is Colt's first revolver, and as you can see, we're missing something here. No trigger guard. It has that drop-down trigger. Now, the most common complaint people have with this gun, by the way, Jensen Ackles is in this movie. He should know quite a bit about this gun because he was Dean Winchester once. If you have your finger out like that on a single action Army, it's the same as trying to use this pistol. The most common complaint you're going to ever see with this pistol, you can't have your finger down here because the trigger falls when you cock it. And so you basically have to cock it with your finger up there. The most common problem with this pistol is the angle that you have to use to cock it. When you cock it, the trigger falls. There's no trigger guard there to get any leverage on. So when Alec Baldwin says that he took his single action Army and he cocked it with his finger out like that, I have a hard time believing that because it's just such an unnatural position. You really need that finger pressing against the front of that trigger guard so you can lay your hand down in there farther and get the proper leverage. Now, the question that is on everybody's mind, how did those live rounds get in that gun? How did they even get on the set? Well, I'm going to show you something here. This is my personal single action Army, and it is got a bird's head grip. This is for carrying on horseback. I do that. And this one is loaded with 5. I'm going to very safely cock the hammer, drop a cartridge out. That is what a loaded cartridge looks like. You see the bullet here in the top. So this right here is what most blanks look like. They will be loaded with powder and will usually have a different colored primer in the base of them, but there will be nothing sticking out the top. Now the only thing that could be confused with this is a full wad cutter, which you don't see much of very often, especially in the .45 Colt round. There are a few other blanks that are made completely out of black plastic that do have rounded tips, but they look absolutely nothing like this. So this live round would be very difficult to mistake for a blank, but it would be very easy to mistake for an inert dummy cartridge that has no powder that they would use just for visual effect. Now there's something interesting I've noticed that nobody else has pointed out. Alec Baldwin fired 1 round and it went, by the way, .45 Colt is a very powerful round for anybody who thinks that the old single action Army Colts and things like that weren't powerful. It did penetrate 2 people and killed 1 and seriously wounded another. He fired 1 round. At least 1 of them was in Alec Baldwin's bandolier. 1 of them was in Jensen Ackles' belt. And I believe 3 more were found elsewhere in a box or laying around. So what's that tell me? There were 6 rounds on set. Now, this is just a theory, mind you. Somebody had probably been using that gun as a single action Army, just a regular gun to shoot at some point. What happened was these bullets could not have been mixed in with blanks. They would have had to have been mixed in with dummy rounds because a blank, as you've seen before, does not look like a live cartridge. It would be very, very visible and plain to somebody loading that when they should be loading a blank. What I think happened was the 6 shots were in the revolver, someone kicked them out of the revolver, and somehow they ended up in with the dummy rounds, because that is 1 cylinder full of shells. Now, is this to be blamed on Hannah Reed? Could it be blamed on Alec Baldwin? Absolutely. Not the fact that the rounds showed up. Well, yes, the fact that the rounds did show up on set is partially his fault because he's not only the main actor, he's the producer. He hires the safety people. He hires everyone. It's his set. But the fact that the hammer was pulled back, the trigger was pulled and let go, and the bullet left the gun while it was in his hand absolutely means that he holds some responsibility for this shooting. When you're the one that pulls the trigger, that bullet has no mind of its own. You're the man behind the gun. When you pull the trigger, you're responsible for everything that happens after that action. So anyway, that's just my final thoughts on this, and I appreciate y'all watching, and this is probably going to go to trial. I say probably because anyone who knows how that manslaughter cases work, first of all, he's not even been arrested or actually arraigned yet. Charges have only been filed. That means, first of all, he has to be arraigned. They're going to have to go through a hearing to determine whether or not this should even go forward into court. And then there will be discoveries, and there will be appeals filed. There will be a selection of judges. And if through all of this he somehow manages to mess it up enough that he finally winds up in court, well, I'm going to be watching a lot of Nick Rekieta, because LawTube is going to have a blast with this court case. And to be quite honest, I'm going to be very interested in watching very closely, because I really don't want to see someone take my favorite of all-time firearm and drag its name, the Single Action Army, through the dirt, and all of a sudden you're going to have people once again thinking that this is the most unsafe platform that ever existed, and when in reality, nothing could be farther from the truth. So as always, trust in God, keep your powder dry. Bye.